If I had to make recommendations as to where to go to learn a little bit more about photography, I would say that I will give you the following resources. One, I learned artistic perspective and art history from a fellow called Adam Morelli. Now, he's withdrawn from the internet as far as photography is concerned, but he still has some courses on the website called Udemy, and you could look up Adam Morelli and take all of his courses on art and photography, and they're all excellent in giving you basic principles. I've taken workshops with Sam Abel, and there are a number of YouTube videos mostly put out by B&H Photography featuring Sam Abel. He is a photographer that really inspired me and did a lot of work with understanding a single image micro-composition process, and he's just phenomenal. I took courses with a gal named Valerie Jardin. She does sort of street photography workshops at a basically introductory level, and taking a Valerie Jardin workshop may be very interesting for people because what you will learn are the basic principles of street and travel photography, and those basic principles will never steer you wrong. So she was one who I would recommend, and she has some ebooks which are interesting. I think you can sign up for online coaching, but going to one of her workshops will probably give you all the basic principles of photography that you need. And then finally, I follow a fellow called David Duchemin. Over the years, he's done several different projects with photography, but he has helped me in the end to recognize software for collection of images or projects. And I could talk about how I do it, which is different than he does it. I don't use Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop. I use Photomechanic. I use Photolab by DxO. I use Affinity Photo and Affinity Publisher to work some of my projects. The one thing I can tell you, or the one thing that has gone wrong for me repeatedly over the decades, is if you put your photos into a database, be that Adobe Lightroom, Apple Photos, Google Photos, you more or less rely upon either the program to artificially identify the subject, or you have to give it a tag or a keyword or a caption which you can search on. And so my philosophy goes more back to a traditional library or filing card system. I organize all my photos manually in folders on my computer, and then I tag them or put them into collections or projects. And I may work with those virtual projects, but the images stay in their original folders. I would copy them and work on copies, but I would always leave the originals in place. The difficulty with database-driven programs is that you create a variety of virtual copies and all of a sudden find yourself working on an image, altering it, not realizing that's not the virtual copy but the actual original copy, and then you're kind of in a bad place. So I would avoid trusting software. I would avoid trusting artificial intelligence organizational programs at this stage of the game. And this is 2023, so in the future it might get better, but keep your images in folders. I use the year, put all the images for 1 year in one folder. I create subfolders of large projects, so if I do a trip, there'll be a trip in that year, and then let's say I go to that same place 5 times over the course of a decade. Well, I could create a virtual project with images from that location spanning the 5 different trips over 10 years and work on that virtual project. So a limited number of images, where I might have 1,000 images to begin with, I'm only going to have 50 images that I'm going to keep in a project at the end of it, because you have to cull the important images from the mistakes that you make along the way. Speaking of mistakes, I've made plenty of them, and you can't learn unless you make mistakes, figure out what you did wrong, and then correct it. So don't hesitate to take a lot of photographs initially. Keep as many as you think you need, but don't hesitate to delete a bunch of them at the beginning. I know some people say never delete anything. Well, if they're out of focus, if the lighting is completely wrong, if the photo just is irrelevant, then delete them, because you'll never go back to them. But don't maybe delete every single image in a sequence. So if I were in the Sistine Chapel, I'm not going to delete all the images because the light was wrong. I'm going to delete some of the images where they're useless, but I'm going to keep some as a baseline, because the ability to post-process images changes and improves over time. So don't delete everything. All right, so those are the photographers' courses and philosophies that I would recommend investigating further.